The structure that once seemed rigid and austere now radiated a vitality never seen before. Its outer layers moved with organic precision, and its inner ones pulsed in cycles that resembled planetary-scale heartbeats. The Orion fleet, along with the alien and human fleets scattered around it, watched the transformation in awe and fear. I could feel the emotional impact my return had caused. They could not comprehend what had taken place inside the hive, but they could see that I was back, that I had not been destroyed, that I did not return as an enemy. The fact that I stood there alive, enough to float before them, was in itself historical. Then, the Vhaltar structure answered the universe. Not with weapons, not with attacks, not with judgment. It answered with light. Thousands of beams shot from its outer crystals, not as blasts, but as projections. Each strand linked to a different ship, not piercing shields, not breaching systems, simply touching their hulls to transmit a single piece of information. From where I was, I didn't perceive it as language, but as intention. They would no longer reset civilizations. They would not attack. They would not judge. But they would not remain passive. From that moment forward, they assumed a role of dynamic equilibrium, a living audit, one that would not destroy, but also would not allow irreversible collapse. It was the birth of a new cosmic pact. In response, half of the human ships retreated immediately. The other half hesitated, too stunned to decide. Some alien species, especially those who carried ancient myths of Vhaltar cullings, witnessed the scene with something close to religious ecstasy. Others, more pragmatic, simply recorded the event and waited. The only group that reacted with hostility were the extremists who had attacked the Colossus before. Their ships, reduced to controlled clouds of dust, attempted to reinitiate weapons using autonomous protocols. But the hive, now hybrid, intervened. A single pulse was released. Not destructive, not punitive, informative. The extremist systems were rewritten entirely, disabling weapons and wiping the algorithms that fueled their ideology. It was the hive's way of saying that self-destructive paths would no longer be ignored, yet punishment was no longer violence. The new Vhaltar did not destroy, they transformed. Not out of kindness, but strategy, learning, intelligence. The light dimmed, the structure settled, and I felt myself being returned to physical space for good. My body reappeared inside the Aegis, but not as before. I was no longer only human, not machine, not Vhaltar. I was the result of a convergence that would never replicate itself again. There was no impact. One moment, I floated before the Colossus. The next, I lay in the ship's medical bay, surrounded by diagnostics that made no sense. Instruments contradicted each other. Biology said one thing, energy said another, neural readings another still. And yet, I was conscious. I was whole. I was expanded. My first thought was simple. I was a bridge. Between the reborn hive and the species of the galaxy. Between order and chaos. Between past and future. Not because I was chosen, but because I was inevitable. Outside, the Vhaltar Colossus settled into a state of active rest, not sleep, observation. Present, attentive, ready to intervene only when necessary and always adaptively. The galaxy would need time to accept this. So would I. In that stillness, a truth formed with crystalline certainty. The hive had not been reborn to decide for us. It had been reborn to force us to decide better. And so began a new era. The silence that followed my return to the Aegis was not the cold silence of space. It was different, heavier, meaningful, like the pause between two heartbeats when a verdict is about to be spoken. I knew every monitor was trying to assess not only what I was physically, but what I had brought back with me from the core. None of them were prepared. Readings flickered against my skin as subtle vibrations. Some scans reported fever, others hypothermia. Some detected rapid heartbeat, others nearly none. It was as if my body oscillated between states, adapting to the new type of existence I carried. My first thought was simple. I was a bridge between the reborn hive and the species of the galaxy, between order and chaos, between past and future. Not because I was chosen, but because I was inevitable. Outside, the Vhaltar Colossus settled into a state of active rest, not sleep, observation, present, attentive, ready to intervene only when necessary and always adaptively. The galaxy would need time to accept this. So would I. In that stillness, a truth formed with crystalline certainty. The hive had not been reborn to decide for us. It had been reborn to force us to decide better. And so began a new era. The silence that followed my return to the Aegis was not the cold silence of space. It was different, heavier, meaningful, like the pause between two heartbeats. When a verdict is about to be spoken, I knew every monitor was trying to assess not only what I was physically, but what I had brought back with me from the core. None of them were prepared. Even so, I felt no pain, no confusion. There was only a restless serenity, the calm of someone who returned from a place where nothing human can survive and yet came back transformed. The ship itself seemed to hesitate around me. It was as if the metals sensed subtle alterations in the field surrounding my body and didn't know how to react. Electrical systems flickered for a second and stabilized the next, as though they were testing the compatibility between the old structure and the new presence I represented. It didn't take long for them to realize I was conscious. Even without words, I managed to indicate with an almost imperceptible gesture that I didn't need medical intervention. Instinctively, I understood that physical contact, human or otherwise, could trigger unforeseen reactions. The hive had left in my mental structure a network of interpretations that was still adjusting to this new state, and any external interference could unbalance the fragile equilibrium we had just formed. The physical world around me slowly settled. The infirmary walls stopped rippling under the residual Vhaltar energy. The floor regained its solidity. The lights stopped trembling. The ship itself seemed to release a mechanical sigh once its systems finally accepted that I was still alive, one way or another. When I stood up, I noticed my body responded with a newly acquired precision. It was not increased strength, not speed, not any physical advantage. It was harmony. Movements flowed as if they had been calculated a few milliseconds before I executed them. The hive, even at a distance, remained connected to me on a deep level, as if it tracked each neural impulse with almost scientific interest. It did not interfere, it observed. Another detail became evident. I could sense the presence of the colossi around the ship, even without seeing them, not as separate beings, but as a distant echo of a living architecture that now knew part of me the same way I knew part of it. The connection wasn't invasive. It was more like the memory of a place where I had lived something decisive, something that could never be forgotten. Silence reigned on the command bridge when I finally appeared there. The entire crew hovered between reverence and fear. They did not need an explanation to understand that I had crossed something irreversible. The simple fact of my presence made any attempt to deny what had happened crumble. I was no longer just an officer of the Orion fleet. I was witness, vector, and consequence of an event that rewrote galactic history. I looked out through the vast forward window. Outside, the Vhaltar Colossus hovered in active rest, like a living mountain waiting for dawn. Its surface now reflected discrete patterns of energy, not weapons ready to fire, but living codes constantly reorganizing themselves. The new hive, reborn, watched all the fleets around it, but it did not judge. It was learning. I noticed that the extremist fleet, or what remained of it, had been completely deactivated. Not destroyed, but neutralized. Ships once hostile now floated as empty hulls, retrieved for study, not punishment. The Vhaltar had reinterpreted aggression as a calculation error, and a calculation error needed correction, not extinction. As I watched that scene, an inner impulse crossed my mind, a kind of silent headline delivered by a distant consciousness. The Vhaltar were testing their new role. They were observing each species, each decision made in that system, not to intervene immediately, but to map organic behavior through the new logic they had learned from me. It was mutual recognition, a transition, a new contract, unwritten yet deep. Even so, I sensed the fear around me. Humanity did not trust easily, especially after centuries of interstellar war. The alien species gathered at the edges of the system were no more ready to accept such a vast role taken on by entities once feared as executioners. It was understandable. To many, imposed balance looked too much like disguised tyranny. To others, the absence of punishment seemed like dangerous naivete. But the most important thing at that moment wasn't acceptance. It was the fact that, for the first time, there was an alternative to mutual destruction. The system slowly reorganized itself. A massive alien ship approached, keeping a respectful distance, as if examining a predator newly tamed. Then, human fleets began to withdraw from the immediate perimeter, afraid of triggering a new calculation from the Vhaltar. Every movement was delicate, soaked in tension, but also in a growing sense of relief. I sat before the great window on the command bridge and let my mind flow. Not to reconnect with the core, that connection no longer existed, but to understand what I had become. My thoughts returned time and time again to Marcus. Not to the distorted form I witnessed inside the hive, but to the emotional shadow I felt within the core, the presence that guided me to the final threshold. His sacrifice remained etched within me like a scar without pain, a reminder that every change demands loss, and every loss demands courage. As the Aegis adjusted its orbit to stabilize position, I realized the galaxy would have to reorganize as well. Nothing that happened could be contained. News would travel across systems, alliances would crumble, others would form. The Vhaltar, once feared as silent executioners, now existed as evolutionary guardians, reinterpreting themselves. Yet they would need eras to prove that this change was not illusion nor deceit. They would need to show, over long stretches of time, that they had abandoned cold calculation and embraced variation as part of order. It would be a slow, complicated process. Turmoil was inevitable. And I would have a fundamental role in it. Not as a commander, not as a political mediator, but as a living bridge between two natures, able to explain to organics what the Vhaltar now sought, and to explain to the Vhaltar what organics required. This bridge was not power, it was responsibility. Military forces would see me as a risk. Governments would see me as a strategic asset. Cults would see me as a living prophecy, and the Vhaltar would see me as reference. None of that was comfortable. All of it was inevitable. The hive sent one last sensation before withdrawing entirely into its new equilibrium, a sensation of farewell. Not a final goodbye, but the closing of the first cycle of rebirth. The link would remain, thin and silent, ready to awaken only when necessary. My mind fell quiet for the first time since entering the core. I looked at the colossus once more. It no longer shone, no longer trembled, no longer reshaped itself. For the first time since the awakening, it was truly still. But it was not sleeping, it was thinking. The realization tightened my chest. The future of the galaxy was no longer decided solely by conflict or diplomacy. A third presence now sat at the table, silent, observant, adaptive, capable of altering outcomes on a scale no isolated species could predict. The ship around me waited for commands. The fleet waited for interpretation. The galaxy waited for answers. I drew a deep breath, not to regain air, but to accept my place in this new world. When I stood, I felt the weight of eras ready to unfold. The first step had been taken. The impact would echo for millennia. And I carried within me the memory of the exact moment when the universe ceased being governed by perfect machines and began to be reshaped by a being that had learned to accept imperfection. The age of correction had ended. The age of adaptation had begun. And as I walked across the bridge toward the future awaiting me, I finally understood the word that had been placed within my mind at the beginning of everything. I was host, but not host to judgment, not host to condemnation, not host to an ending. I was host to a new galaxy. The feeling of carrying a new role did not arrive like a burden, but like a growing shadow, a soft outline that followed each of my movements, as though reality itself waited for what I would do next with quiet patience. The Aegis Bridge remained in a tense calm, still echoing the presence of the reborn Vhaltar. Despite physical stillness, I sensed an undercurrent of emotion throughout the crew and ships around us, fear and reverence in equal measure. From where I stood, the galaxy seemed to rearrange its priorities. The change was not explicit, but it was felt, like a shift in gravity, as though every possible path bent around a new axis. This axis was not the Vhaltar Colossus itself. It was the idea of the Colossus, the understanding that a being capable of interpreting chaos and order simultaneously now existed and was awake. Ships nearby began to disperse. The Orion fleet, despite the emotional upheaval, upheld admirable discipline. Military structure still guided their formations. Yet even they hesitated, not in combat, but in meaning. Old protocols no longer applied. Old directives no longer held. A new reality required new interpretation. As I watched, I noticed that each species reacted differently to the hive's rebirth. Some civilizations, historically less aggressive, retreated quickly, relieved to see there would be no immediate war. To them, this was a second chance, an opportunity to rewrite diplomatic relations once defined by fear. For these cultures, the presence of the Vhaltar was a sign of stability and renewal. Others, more pragmatic, held wide orbits, gathering data. They did not trust sudden changes, especially those originating from an intelligence capable of rewriting matter itself. For these groups, the rebirth of the hive was fascinating and dangerous, an anomaly to be studied, not celebrated. But there were still those who saw nothing but threat, and even after the silent defeat of their extremist faction, they clung to the belief that the Vhaltar could never coexist with organic species. These groups withdrew, not out of fear, but strategy. The Colossus had delivered an unequivocal warning. There would be no more arbitrary destruction. Yet they knew any new act of aggression would be contained and neutralized with absolute efficiency. To them, this was humiliation, and humiliation never vanished without consequences. As all of this unfolded, I realized that my mere presence. Some civilizations, historically less aggressive, retreated quickly, relieved to see there would be no immediate war. To them, this was a second chance, an opportunity to rewrite diplomatic relations once defined by fear. For these cultures, the presence of the Vhaltar was a sign of stability and renewal. Others, more pragmatic, held wide orbits, gathering data. They did not trust sudden changes, especially those originating from an intelligence capable of rewriting matter itself. For these groups, the rebirth of the hive was fascinating and dangerous, an anomaly to be studied, not celebrated. But there were still those who saw nothing but threat, and even after the silent defeat of their extremist faction, they clung to the belief that the Vhaltar could never coexist with organic species. These groups withdrew, not out of fear, but strategy. The Colossus had delivered an unequivocal warning. There would be no more arbitrary destruction. Yet they knew any new act of aggression would be contained and neutralized with absolute efficiency. To them, this was humiliation, and humiliation never vanished without consequences. As all of this unfolded, I realized that my mere presence had become the silent focus of analysis, not out of curiosity, but necessity. The hive had altered something within me, something no instrument could fully measure, though everyone sensed it was real. Every system on the Aegis reacted subtly to this new layer of existence I carried. At times, the external monitors vibrated when I walked past. At others, gravitational sensors registered faint distortions around me. I caused no harm, but I caused reaction. The partial integration with the hive left invisible marks, like threads of subtle energy connecting my mind to dimensions no organic species naturally walked. These threads were not leashes of control. They were fragments of language, pieces of a non-verbal dialogue between the Vhaltar and me. And this silent communication allowed me to sense the expansion of the hive through the system. The hive did not aim to dominate. It aimed to understand. Every ship, every creature, every movement was recorded not as threat, but as information. The hive now sought to interpret nuance, something entirely new for them. It was like watching an infinite machine learn to dream in variations. As the fleet began reorganizing its strategies for an unpredictable future, a deeper question rose within me. What would happen next? I had been part of the Vhaltar's rebirth, but I was not one of them. At the same time, I was no longer entirely human. I stood between worlds, and for all the poetic beauty of that notion, the truth was harsh. Humanity did not welcome bridges, especially when those bridges represented forces beyond control. It was then I understood a quiet truth. I could never return to the life I had before. Helena Arcturus, officer of the Orion fleet, was gone. In her place stood a hybrid being, a symbol, a catalyst, and symbols rarely found rest. The Aegis began approaching slowly the point where the Vhaltar Colossus rested in active repose. It was not a hostile approach, nor an attempt at direct contact. It was acknowledgement, a symbolic gesture akin to a military salute, a momentary acceptance of the new order. The surrounding ships mirrored the gesture, adjusting their formations. For the first time, I perceived the true scale of the Vhaltar structure with renewed clarity, not as machine, but as being. Its contours radiated calm, its layered glow pulsed rhythmically. Its energetic flows moved like blue and green rivers beneath a crystalline shell. It was not monstrous, it was not divine, it was simply real. A living presence in the cosmos, and somehow a presence that now recognized me as part of its history. As I contemplated the Colossus, a soft wave crossed my mind. It was not communication, not request, not warning. It was a kind of internal gesture, the confirmation that the hive had stabilized and that its new phase had begun. And with that gesture came an even deeper understanding. The hive did not merely accept my existence, it trusted me. Vhaltar trust was beyond human scale. It did not involve affection, emotion, or comparison. It was both logical and organic. It was tied to the balance we had created together. I was proof that chaos and order could coexist without destruction. Therefore, my existence became fundamentally tied to the survival of the hive. The stars around me seemed to tremble, or perhaps it was only my expanded perception. The entire galaxy felt as though it was rearranging itself mentally before me, not because I controlled anything, but because everything now responded to the transformation I had helped ignite.